bonjour et bienvenue au hard sell, où le bâton dans le swill-bucket cliquait en retour. This is the Hotel des Invalides in Paris, the centre of France's military history. And this gargantuan memorial here is the sarcophagus containing the mortal remains of Napoleon Bonaparte. In death, as in life, overcompensating. Alright, we'll get this out of the way early. He wasn't really a tiny little shortarse. Everyone was shorter in those days. Besides, the French used a different version of feet and inches to everyone else, because they're French. Their 5'2" was our 5'7", which was basically average height at the time. But English propagandists ran with the 5'2" thing, and so he's remembered as a comical Ronnie Corbett figure, albeit with all avuncularity replaced with seething megalomaniac resentment. But how fair is that image? I don't know, this is a program about adverts, remember? You can't have as massive an impact on history as Napoleon Q. Bonaparte and not pass into the kind of pure symbolism that makes you fodder for the great ship of capital. Also, there's this film that's about to come out. All good reasons for a Pavlov's Bell episode. I don't really need to explain why this shortarse, look, he still wasn't very tall, okay, why this shortarse is iconic. You can't conquer 500,000 square miles, including almost all of Europe and bits of Africa, and not become something of a household word, if not necessarily one with positive implications. Before World War II, Napoleon basically occupied the semiotic space Hitler does today, being the then most recent example of someone trying, and very nearly succeeding, to conquer the world. He's got a certain visual advantage over Hitler, however. You can reduce both to very simple visual cues. In fact, Hitler actually wins out there in a sense, because all you have to do to evoke him is correctly apply a little black square. The closest thing Napoleon has is the tricorn, but thanks to that and his peculiar stance, he has an instantly recognisable silhouette, whereas Hitler's silhouette, even in uniform, just looks like some guy, unless he's actively giving a Sieg Heil. And then there's the fact that Napoleon's atrocities were somewhat lesser, although the point of comparison is Hitler, don't forget. And more crucially, longer ago at over 200 years. So it's alright to use him as essentially a sock puppet for selling things. Not that there needed to be that much distance. Here's some coffee from barely a century later, and a brand of flour named after him. In fact, in the late 19th and early 20th centuries, he was used as an advertising mascot a whole lot, and generally in an admiring way, venerated in a way his fellow defeated leader Hitler decidedly wouldn't be, and in fact is impossible to imagine. Particularly with such glowing copy some of these employed, in case you were any doubt as to why they chose to associate themselves with this guy. Why the name? It is the Napoleon of flowers. It has no equal, it has no peer. Well, this one, which of all things is a stuff advert for oysters. It's pretty generally accepted that Napoleon was a great man. He had his faults, but at least he had a lot of oysters. But here's one for a watchmaker, which doesn't fall down in praise of him, but still depicts him as a legendary authority figure to be respected and not trifled with. Again, imagine his latter-day equivalent Hitler being given this kind of treatment. Even with the current Nazi revival, we're not there yet. Give it another decade or two. And also remember that all these pre-World War II artefacts are within a century of Napoleon's life, and in some cases of the wars themselves. Mind you, there is the fact that Napoleon was, at the least, a genuinely great general of prodigious and inarguable military talent, while Hitler was a twat, who was barely a tenth as clever as he thought he was, and in all honesty had very little talent at all, besides fanaticism so deep and all-encompassing it proved magnetic. By the time television advertising was a thing, a decade after World War II ended, the little Corsican git was safely outside of living memory by at least a couple of generations. It was a lot easier and more glibly obvious just to take the piss by now. Not that there wasn't still a certain amount of buried respect, as in this early Hamlet advert where he's almost a tragic figure.
Happiness is a cigar called Hamlet, the mild cigar from Benson and Hedges.
Or this American one for Pepto-Bismol.
Josephine, my army is being destroyed by heartburn and indigestion. All day we fight against the Russians and win. All night we fight against their food and lose. We must have these tablets to help coat the stomachs of my men. We must have these tablets with the antacid to ease the pain of being sick and away. Josephine, I implore you, send Pepto-Bismol.
Of course, he's even more of an abstract icon in America since he never actually went there himself. He did have ambitions there. He bought a big strip down the middle of it from the Spanish. But it turned out to be more trouble than it was worth, especially with the war in Europe taking up his time. So he sold it on to the United States after a few years. I mention all this so I can show you a tourist advert for part of it.
If I had only known, I would never have sold Iowa.
This is Iowa.
Yep.
I'm not surprised Iowa needed to import someone else's icon to promote itself. Even this very advert depicts it as having nothing much but corn, rivers, and stultifying conversations. And corn. And Slipknot and corn. But again, there's that strange dissonance, the vacillation between piss-taking and a sort of almost involuntary respect. See it again in Carrefour Poland's recent campaign, where the former emperor became their spokesman, and again is treated with a certain amount of reverence. Also, I'm told.
W Carrefour mierzymy wysoko, zarówno gdy chodzi o sprawy rangi najwyższej, jak i najniższej. Dlatego ustanawiam nowe prawo o wyższości niższych cen. Mają rządzić te najniższe i niespoczne. Dopóki ceny nie sięgną nizin niskości, od teraz ceny mają być petit i będę ich bronił do upadłego. Petit, czyli że malutkie. Takie tyci. Te ceny.
Carrefour, to wszystko dla ciebie.
Certainly the bombastic speech isn't completely undermined by the visuals. It gets its dramatic lighting and camera work even as the advert as a whole is clearly making the usual short-ass jokes. So clearly you could basically tell that without understanding the words. I'm expecting a Polish-speaking viewer to tell me any minute now that he's actually saying the Polish equivalent of bum whittle farts or something. But it seems impressive if you don't understand it, certainly. And in this Israeli advert for insurance, he's downright heroic.
Company! Hey! Vive la France! Vive la République! Mais qu'est-ce que vous faites? J'ai crié vive la France! C'est pas possible! Il n'y a pas d'assurance! Mais pourquoi? C'est très cher!
לא הגיע הזמן להתקדם בפיתוח? ביטוח ישיר מתחייבים החודש למחיר הנמוך ביותר בביטוח החובה. לרוכשים ביטוח מקיף לרכב לחודש יולי. תתקדם, תרוויח.
Yes, I could actually translate the French, but not the Hebrew, sorry. Staying in the financial sector, Eagle Star Pensions had a bizarre campaign in the mid-80s starring Rowan Atkinson as various historical figures. I say various, to my knowledge there was only 2. The other one had him as Boudica, before they gave up and switched to that overwrought yuppie thing we saw a few episodes ago.
Right.
Must have been too abstract or not funny enough. Probably both. Anyway, you guessed it, the other one was about Napoleon, and again, couldn't quite make up its mind how much to mock him.
This man had a glittering career. Lots of people under him. A nice house. In fact, property all over the place. But then, things started going wrong. And he was forced to retire with a considerable drop in his standard of living. Sadly for Napoleon, Eagle Star weren't there to help him. Make sure your standards don't drop. Ask your financial advisor about Eagle Star's pension plans. Because with Eagle Star, you can face the future with confidence.
Little joke at the end about his stereotypical stance, hand tucked into shirt at a right angle. For something so small and essentially trivial, it's proved to be impressively fertile semiotic ground.
Kit Kat? It has to be Kit Kat.
But when you come down to it, poor old Napoleon is a distant enough historical figure to be depicted with no respect whatsoever, if one should want to. Look at this thing with Garmin sat-navs.
Turn right onto Josephine Street. Traffic ahead. Arriving at Parc de Saint-Cloud.
First thought, that's an expensive advert for such a cheap joke. It ran during the Superb Owl, apparently, so maybe they felt obligated to spend millions on it. Second thought, insulting Napoleon is one thing, but did he really have to stick it to his beloved horse Marengo as well? And I do mean beloved. Marengo's skeleton, or rather a replica of it, is hanging directly over the Emperor's tomb right now. Look. See? What did the horse ever do to you? Apart from bear a bloodthirsty megalomaniac on its back during its wars of conquest, I suppose. And a piss-taking can go all the way down to outright silliness. As for example...
General Napoleon?
Me?
Are you okay?
No. My men say no one is flakier than Napoleon.
Oh, not you, sir. Napoleon's bakery.
Why is that?
Oh, Napoleon's bakery uses only the best ingredients.
Très bien.
To make crusty French breads, buttery flaky pastries, and wonderful desserts.
Desserts? Anyone desserts, and he is shot.
No one is flakier than Napoleon's bakery, now at Sippy's.
I heard that.
Immediate summary execution for every last one of them. At least the logo's more respectful these days. The old one looked like a reference to the break Roscoe era, even though it obviously wasn't, because Napoleon's bakery is from Hawaii, which is a long way from Ashford in Kent. However, the champions of using Napoleon as an advertising mascot or symbol, which is apparently a competitive event now, are undoubtedly Courvoisier, with their Napoleon cognac. Remember that fancy silhouette? It's literally their logo. Their whole premise is that this is what the Emperor would drink, and did when he was alive. And so naturally he's all over their advertising. As an icon, or sometimes as a genuinely terrifying looming supernatural presence watching from beyond the grave. And sometimes indirectly and purely conceptually, as with the series of ads from the 70s, which are clearly set then or then abouts, but replace Napoleon with a raffish, mustachioed flashman figure. Because with the best will in the world, Napoleon wasn't exactly a sex god, even gender-flipped. Napoleon Bonaparte as icon, particularly for advertising purposes, ultimately comes down to the slogan on that eerie Poltergeist Napoleon advert. The Born Leader. Not an inaccurate description of the man himself, and obviously a property any product would want to claim for themselves. He was a leader of men and a genuine military genius in the body of a ridiculous little man in a silly hat. And it's that dichotomy that fuels his icon and makes him work as a mascot for anything from insurance to flour to the state of Iowa. You could take him deadly seriously, as the flour did, or you can take the piss, like the Hawaiian bakery. He functions either way, and more importantly, he survives either way. Not bad for a little git. You just sat through a Bob the Fish production. Nice! If you haven't already, you absolutely must check out bobthefish.org.uk. Literally hundreds more videos not unlike that one, adding up to days worth of entertainment and all absolutely free. But if you're not a cold-hearted skinflint, you can always support us on Patreon. For as little as anything at all, you can make programs like the one you just watched possible in the first place, and become eligible for bonus material such as glimpses of the book I'm writing about the BBC, monthly riffings on random commercial breaks, the complete archives of the angry political satire magazine Two Sons, and even the odd very occasional bonus video essay unavailable anywhere else. If nothing else, you should prevent me from starving and or freezing to death in the foreseeable future, so that'll be nice. No pressure or anything. You make it what it is.